in Alcoholics Anonymous, we
Admission.
have these promises, right? And the very first promise that our big book says is, you will know a new freedom and a new happiness. And that at that moment, I felt the new freedom.
I just had my meeting today. Thank you, Don. That was, again, I feel so parallel and so connected to you more than I've ever have with most people, even though, and we hear that, right? If we hear our story in the rooms, we consider ourselves pretty lucky in the sense that, someone else has walked very similar path to me. And that's where I would always look for a sponsor with it that had similar background or storyline. As myself, I felt the same way the last time I walked into a meeting in 1994. Raymond, my son, was 5 days old. I was still in active addiction. Up to that point, I was on medication assistance treatment. I was on methadone and walking into a woman's meeting. And I was like walking into the twilight zone, right? Everything was in slow motion. And
Yeah.
someone that took the carrier, someone walked me to a chair, someone gave me a cup of coffee. My hands, I had to hold it with 2 hands, shaking, and it was a round robin. I remember going into the city to the How Club where they always had a round robin, or the room was always filled with so many people, so you never felt alone. You were, like, shoulder to shoulder. There was meetings that, you would show up and you were shoulder to shoulder with people, standing room only, like concerts, right? But yeah, walking into that room and getting to that place and pausing, right? It almost like the room got silent. You could hear a pin drop. And here was Carol, crackling throat, voice. And my name is Carol, and I'm an addict, and I need help. I can remember those words clearly. And from there, like they say, the rest is history. And it has been an amazing journey. Work in a field. I still work in the field of support and crisis and things like that. I don't see people in, face to face. I hear them every night when I'm on call, when I do a crisis call center. But I hear these stories, and I'm grateful to have a job. Again, this is gonna be my full-time job one day, but, I'm grateful to have a job to be able to share my experience, strength, and hope as you did, or someone did with you first, and that's what we hear about in the step work, first making that admission, cleaning house, and giving back to others. What do you think keeps people, though, stuck, in that place of shame or isolation?
I think the number one common denominator is fear, because they don't know what else to do. It's just the fear of thinking, "I can't tell somebody this. I can't talk to somebody about this. I'm scared to death to talk to somebody about this because even though I'm isolated now, I still have to keep me company. But if I talk to somebody else, I might have to give up that substance. And then what will I have left? Because we don't realize that once we make the connection, we get help that is so much better than that substance that we're relying on. And we start to connect with other people and we find ourselves back in society again. We get to be part of society. We get to connect with other people. We get to, all this time we've been looking at everything from the outside. At least I felt like that. Everything that was going on around me, I was looking at from the outside, but I was never part of it. And if we don't know that we can be part of it, if we don't see what recovery looks like, then we're too afraid to take that next step. I know there I was sitting in a room and I was afraid to say it, even though everybody else did.
Right.
So
I
the
wanted to
fear,
be part of the group, but I didn't wanna be part of the group,
yeah, that's it.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Um, there is a situation that happened to you, on Undercover Boss, or at least afterwards, in regards to someone reached out to you for some assistance. You wanna share a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's the thing. There's actually a little video on that, um, and um, and you can check it out. It's online somewhere, but it's Don and Harold.
Okay.
It
And
was
right,
it
I'll
wa
post it
yeah,
when I
yeah. If
edit.
you could connect that link, it's the day after the show aired. The show aired on CBS, national television. It was right after a football game, I remember. This is going back to 2010, November 2010. The next day, I don't know how he got my email other than he knew I worked for Subway, and the Subway email addresses were all kind of the same, right? It was like, our
First and
first
last
and
name.
last name. He sent me an email, and Harold said, I watched your show, and I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know that I happened to be watching, the TV was on, and I was sitting in my apartment, and I had lost everything. I was facing a felony DUI. And I was unemployed, and I didn't think I would ever get a job back in my field, which is IT. And I didn't think there was any hope. And I hadn't had a drink in about 2 weeks. And I was sitting there, and I was feeling dejected and alone. And I was thinking about going out for a beer. And then you came on, and I started watching because the show came on like right after a football game, and so it came on a few minutes late because it went into overtime. So I guess the football game went off, and there's Undercover Boss, and he said, so I was watching the show and thinking about going out for a beer, and then you said that you were an alcoholic and that you had struggled with this and that you had found recovery and now this was your life. And he said, I thought that if this guy can be in this kind of position and be the boss of Subway, then I have a chance. I have a chance of getting a job back in my field if I continue with recovery. And he said the thought of going out for a beer stopped, and the thought of doing something else, like going to a meeting, came in instead. And he said, I just want to say thank you. Because of you, I didn't drink that night. I didn't drink last night because this is like the next day. And I just wanted to say thanks. So I sent him a message back. And I just said, I really appreciate it. And I thought often about that, the fact that if you can just help one person, then you've made an impact. Somehow I touched his life to the point where he did not go out and drink that day. And I'm pleased to report that after that, they ended up finding, he lived in Indiana. And when Greg Williams was doing the Anonymous People documentary, he said to me, we're going to go find Harold and we're going to go talk to him. And they did. And they interviewed him and they interviewed me and they kind of put the two interviews together. And we got to show up at the premiere of Undercover Boss. And the two of us together, they flew him in for another part of Undercover Boss and like a Where Are They Now kind of thing.
Mhm.
And he was able to say he was 2 years sober. And today he's, what was that, 2010? So he's like 16 years sober. And he and I are Facebook friends.
That is fantastic. Oh my god. I hadn't heard the whole story, and I think I saw a little bit of the clip, but I definitely wanted to talk about that today because that's again, even though with multiple years of recovery, we're still doing the work. That's why I started this podcast because as much as I wanted to get away from the conversation around recovery, it's everything that it's enveloped in me. It's in my soul. The work that I do, every step that I take, um, has everything to do my gratitude. When I start my day off, it's all around gratitude. And if I'm able to help someone else, just see the light at the end of the tunnel like someone did for me, because I was in and out multiple times, and the light at the end of the tunnel was my son that really made that transition and made that shift for me. But as he's now gotten older, my recovery has shifted. And, I look at different pathways and, that definitely help me to help others, right? To be more in the know about recovery. I know we're many nonprofit organizations are under a lot of duress and stress, due to the economy, trying to provide harm reduction services and things like that, and being that advocate. And that's what I got from the anonymous people. When I met Greg, it was at Goodwin College. That was the first time it was actually at that time I was getting my peer support specialist certification. And then I met Greg there and at the viewing. And then it was also he recruited me to be on his board. He had oh gosh, help me out. Connecticut Turning to Youth and Family.
That is right. Connecticut
Yeah,
Turning to Youth and
Connecticut Turning
Families.
to Youth and Family. It's been so long. And then from there, we ended up on the Washington Mall, with
That's right.
artists like Steven Tyler and, again, Sheryl Crow and President
Joe
Obama.
Walsh,
Yeah, Joe Walsh,
Jason
people that
Isbell.
were
Yeah.
either in recovery or affected by addiction, family members and things like that. And there was also family members that were on there because we were in the height of the opioid epidemic. And, you and I have seen a lot and a lot of transition in regards to recovery. I don't consider myself an old timer. I definitely, I'm just open to learning new things so that I can help someone else because that helps us, right? That connects us. That gets us out of that place of isolation. When we're able, I mentioned it last week when I was talking on my solo episode that, that connection, what is it? They say the opposite of addiction is connection, right? And if we can m- make that slight change or that slight shift in someone's thinking, maybe they're not going to stop using or drinking or whatever it is that affecting them at that time, that day. I didn't, but down the road, I had luckily enough to have that remembrance, that
Mm.
memory that my life could be different if I just make one small move, or make one small ask. And even if that Harold wasn't looking to ask for help, in a sense, you may have gotten some help there too, right?
Always, always. It made everything I went through, filming that episode of Undercover Boss wasn't necessarily easy because, you got people following you with cameras all the time. You're getting on airplanes, you're visiting all these stores, and, it was a long process actually, and a stressful one. But that moment with Harold made it all worthwhile.
Yeah. So we talked about anonymous people and your work at Subway, and you're also part of the Phoenix. And you want to share a little bit about what the Phoenix is? Yeah, I saw that. I thought I saw that T-shirt going on. There's some free
Hey,
advertisement.
being involved with the Phoenix, that's been that also came out of Undercover Boss because it was the founder, a co-founder of the Phoenix, Scott Strode. His brother Mark reached out to me actually because his brother was the board chair at the time, and he saw the show and he called. He managed to get my phone number. I don't know how people kept finding me, but he got my phone number
I
at
found you
work.
fine. When I asked you for your bio and a pic, I just went on Google and there was like,
Yeah, I guess I'm kind of there. So I got so I am. It worked out okay. I ended up a rock star. At
hey,
least I'm a
yeah,
legend
full
in my
circle.
own mind. The thing about the Phoenix is that Mark reached out to me and he left me a message, a voicemail on my work voicemail. And, I had so many messages after that show. And all of a sudden, here's this guy, and he sounded so sincere, and he really wanted to help people. And he just made a brief mention of what it was they were doing, and it sounded kind of unique because it was building a sober, active community, right? Helping people find sobriety by making connection through doing active things together, like bicycling and hiking and walking and rock climbing and yoga, things like that. And he said that his brother had started this out in Colorado, and they had a gym out there, and they had a couple of chapters. But he said, I saw you, and I saw you're in recovery, and you know how to make organizations grow because you helped Subway grow. Because I was involved in the growth of Subway from 166 stores when I started to over 40,000 when I retired. So he said, hey, could you, maybe help us out a little or give a pep talk or something. So I ended up flying out to Colorado and talking to the very small staff at the time, Scott Strode and his team. And I talked about Subway, and I talked about my recovery. I told my story, and then I talked about Subway and the growth of Subway and how we grew. And Scott ended up asking me to be on the board. So I was on the board for a period of time. And I said, when I retire from Subway, I'll be the board chair. So I was the board chair for 3 years after I retired. And my part in the Phoenix was to help come up with ideas as to how we can grow Phoenix and reach out to more people around the country instead of just Colorado. And through using a couple of the ideas that I gave Scott, which he mentioned in his book, and with the incredible work that the team did, the Phoenix team did, in their process of what we call it rise, recover, live, or as Scott's book says, rise, recover, thrive. We were able to start growing outside of Colorado and start to open chapters. Now there's, sort of a headquarters in Colorado, a headquarters in Boston now, which is where Scott
Oh,
lives.
right. I
And
remember that.
and there are chapters in I think all but a couple of states. And whereas maybe it was, a couple of thousand people that they had touched back when I first met Scott, now it's been over 1 million people, like 1 million strong, we say. And that's just the beginning. So the Phoenix has now got chapters all over the country. There's a huge volunteer network involved, and it's become so impactful in the recovery community. And I've been so pleased to be a part of that. I would say proud, but pride you got to be careful with that
Pride
word,
can
right?
get in the way. We
Yeah.
know that, right?
Yeah,
It
I can
can get
be
in the way
proud in a good
alongside of
way, but
ego.
yeah, but I was I'm grateful to know Scott. He's a wonderful friend, and
Yes,
his
I got
brother
a
Mark
chance
is a
to meet
wonderful
him about
friend.
10
I
years
see
ago.
him on a Zoom
Mhm,
meeting every week,
mhm.
and it's been such a great part of my recovery over the last 10 years or so. I stepped down from the board because I'd been on there for so long. I felt it was time to turn it over to the new folks, but I'm still on the Phoenix Advisory Board and I'm still a Phoenix volunteer.
Mm. Again, we talk about that transition, right? Where isolation, shame, guilt, all the other isms, brought us to this point right now. And maybe our recovery definitely doesn't my recovery doesn't look like it did day one when I walked into a room with my son in tow, but it is, I don't know, it's really fulfilling to know that when people say beyond your wildest dreams, this is it. This is it right now. Me talking with you, this is beyond my wildest dreams to have this connection, to be able to share our stories, but also, put that message of hope out there to others. Maybe, yeah, people might see this video or, this podcast and say, that's them. That's never gonna happen to me. I uttered those words many, many times, and then it happened, right? Whether it was the burning bush or the cuffs on, or I was heading to rehab, or worse, that I was being told that if you don't get straight, if you don't get clean, if you don't get in recovery, we're going to take your son, and that was, again, the eye opener. And places like the Phoenix, we talk about mind, body, and spirit. You can't just go in and stop drinking and drugging. It may work for some people. I shouldn't say you can't. People do it, right? They get labeled dry drunk or so on and so forth. But I want that happy, joyous, and free life that you spoke about earlier. And I know it's work. That's the thing. It's a daily reprieve every single day.
That's
I
right.
might have a routine of journaling, talking to an old sponsor. I don't go to too many 12-step meetings anymore, but I do other pathways like Recovery Dharma. I do a lot of them on mostly online. Since COVID, I'm still stuck in that place, but I'm slowly getting myself out there into the community. You get real comfortable, right? And I have been called forward in regards to Carol, you need to get out of the house a little bit more, let people see you, be known. I think that little girl, that little Carol comes out, wants to isolate, wants to protect, wants to be safe because of what's going on in the world. But I know that I was also given a gift, and that gift can't be hidden under the covers. It can't be hidden in spaces of shame. So
Yeah.
uh, as we start to round up our time together, and I hope that we can definitely do this in person the next time, because we aren't that far away from each other. We do Leadership on the Edge once a month, and I just have one question in regards to your area of leadership, but this is more so for other people that are in leadership that may be struggling with active addiction and not knowing if they could have let it all out in the boardroom with staff and their superiors, or they may be, again, the boss, the undercover boss. What would you want to tell them? What you told Harold, maybe part of it, but what would you want to tell them? Or if someone's listening, what would you want them to know that it's okay?
I think you just said it. It's okay. The reality is what you were saying earlier, we have a daily reprieve. So all we have is today. And if you think about it this way, if you're reluctant to get going because it just seems overwhelming, the concept of getting into recovery and changing your life, just realize it's just today.
Mhm,
All you have to do is start today. And what happened for me is those one days at a time added up
mhm.
to a lot of years, a lot of decades, But uh, there's that. And, if you're someone who wants to, you're in a leadership position and you want to help other people, there's nothing helps other people like hearing somebody else's story and being able to share yourself and share your story. One of the first things I did after I got out of rehab, and Fred DeLuca, the owner of Subway, gave me a second chance. He said, "Don, you went through rehab. You did the right thing. You still have a job here. Come on back. And, we'll keep an eye on you, but you have your job." And as I said, it turned into an amazing 40-year career traveling the world. But the thing is, you start with one day at a time.
Mhm.
You start with desire then to help other people and share yourself. And so I went back to HR after I got out of rehab, and I said, "I'm not going to go stand in the lobby and preach about recovery, but if there's anybody in the company that comes to you, meaning HR, or is getting in trouble because they have a substance use disorder or they're struggling with things, just tell them they have someone they can talk to. And that's me." And
What
that
an
was
open
kind of
door.
incredible because when they went to go talk to somebody and they saw it was somebody from upper management, who is in recovery, who is willing to talk to them, that makes an impact. But it's really just the ability to talk to somebody else who's been there, making that connection. You talked about this is great that we are talking. You and I are talking right now, and other people are listening, so they're part of the conversation. And that's how it works. We cannot do this alone. I cannot do this alone. You cannot do this alone, but we can do this together. And that's how we stay in recovery. That's how we get better with our mental health. That's how we come out of isolation. And that's how we find a life beyond our wildest dreams, filled with relationships and warmth and love.
I love it. I'm gonna leave it right there, Don. I'm not even gonna comment. My smile enough just shows it. Thank you so, so much for being here with me and sharing to our listeners. And again, if this is your first time here and anything that Don and I said today resonated with you, our information will be in the description. So please reach out. You can subscribe, you can like, please share this podcast with others so that we can build this community. Just hope that everyone that is listening, you just keep rising, stay strong, keep on being honest with yourself, and keep cruising on the edge. I want to thank you all and thank you, Don.